What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and welcome to another episode of Unanswered. This episode, I'd like to cover a topic from the Warcraft universe, specifically something that happens outside of the games. You do get a brief glimmer of the aftermath while playing Warcraft 3, but we as players don't get to see the full picture. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into it. As you can hopefully tell from the title of this video, we're going to try to answer the question of what exactly killed Gul'dan. And no, I'm not talking about the alternate reality version from Warlords of Draenor. We're taking him out ourselves in Legion. I'm talking about the original Lord of the Shadow Council from our timeline. Any of you who've played Warcraft 3 before are probably wondering what I'm talking about, since you may already know that Gul'dan was supposed to be taken out by demons in the Tomb of Sargeras. You would be correct, but that's only part of the question. The description of the demons given in the novel Tides of Darkness by Aaron Rosenberg paints a very unusual image. Here's the direct quotes that I'm talking about. Beyond the doorway lay a darkness that even Gul'dan's light could not penetrate. A darkness so cold it froze his fingers numb in an instant and turned his breath to ice. And slowly that darkness took form, coalescing into discrete shapes, scuttling, crawling, writhing shapes, with eyes that glowed darker than the rest. So dark it hurt to look upon them. And these dark shapes smiled as they approached the vault door and exited their eternal prison, advancing upon the stunned Gul'dan and his warlocks. Demons, but none like he had ever seen before. Gul'dan thought he had faced terrible creatures in the past, but these made all others seem mere shadows, harmless and easily dispelled. "No!" Gul'dan screamed in his mind, unable to make his mouth work to form the words out loud. "This is not how it's supposed to happen! Sargeras promised!" He tried to summon his magic, to raise his hands, to run, to do anything, but the mere sight of the beings before him had him paralyzed, body and soul, and he who had thought himself master could do nothing but stare and shudder as they crept towards him, their shadowy claws reaching out to caress his face. We get a slightly clearer description of these guardians a few pages later. Something strange had emerged from the building before them, something with too many limbs, and too many joints, and altogether too many teeth. It had been followed by others, and they had attacked the orcs without pause, tearing into them like hunger-crazed animals setting upon fresh prey. Several orcs had been frozen with fear at the sight of the terrible creatures, but others had fought back, and they had finally destroyed the last one, though it had taken enough wounds to slay a dozen orcs before it had finally stopped thrashing and biting. But wait, there's more in the novel Beyond the Dark Portal by Aaron Rosenberg and Christy Golden. Beyond the door lay an almost impenetrable darkness, as if night had been condensed and hidden here where the light would never find it. Standing in that darkness, just past the doorway, was a creature from a nightmare. It towered over them, standing so tall it was forced to hunch within the room beyond. Its skin was scaled and covered in bumps that seemed to ripple, as if somehow the surface were fluid like water. Spikes jutted out from the shoulders, the forearms, the chest, and various other places. The overlong arms ended in huge hands with long claws. The face was too narrow at the bottom and too wide at the top, with slanting eyes that glowed a smoky, roiling yellow, and a tiny mouth somehow filled with an insane number of razor-sharp teeth, a long tail whipped around behind it. The first quote referenced is describing the exact moment where Gul'dan is attacked and fatally wounded by the guardians inside of the Tomb of Sargeras. Believe it or not, the demon caressing his face is the fatal blow that took down the infamous Warlock. As Gul'dan leaves his fellow Warlocks to die, the spot on his cheek where the demon touched had begun to fester and hemorrhage uncontrollably. Not a very glorious death, but one that the orc probably deserved. The second quote is from when Rend and Maim Blackhand go searching for Gul'dan in order to bring justice to the Horde for his betrayal. When they arrived at the Tomb Island, they found the Guardians coming out of the main entrance and into the daylight in order to attack them. The last quote, which is from an entirely different novel, describes a creature found inside the tomb when the Horde sends a few forces back to Azeroth after the Second War ended. The orcs returned to the place of Gul'dan's demise sometime around a year afterwards in order to find the Scepter of Sargeras. Their ultimate plan was to bring certain artifacts to Ner'zhul to power new portals to new worlds for the Horde to conquer. You should already know how that subplot turned out. The reason this tidbit from the lore is so interesting to me is because it doesn't appear to describe any known demon that we've ever seen. It appears to describe something that had a fair amount of intelligence while retaining the capacity to rip through seasoned orc warriors like a savage animal. On top of that, whatever the Guardians were seemed to be relatively proficient at using fell magic. At first, it almost seems like they're trying to describe a fellhound or another beast-like demon, but that appears to not be the case later when describing the Guardian's sentience. In Beyond the Dark Portal, the creature even shouts at the orcs that they wouldn't pass any further into the Tomb of Sargeras. Trying to identify exactly which race put the kibosh on Gul'dan is going to require quite a bit of detective work to put together all of the obscure descriptions. The first thing that stuck out to me when hearing the characteristics of Gul'dan's assailant had to be how it appeared to coalesce from the shadows. This reminded me a lot of the new demon race coming with Legion, the Inquisitor model. They definitely have that vibe of lurking in the shadows, being stronger than most other demons, and they even have long arms ending in claws. Though the Inquisitors aren't a perfect match with what information we've been given. Nowhere in the passage did it say anything about the Guardians floating. What's more is that they were described with having too many limbs, whereas these models only have 2. In fact, when looking through the various models for demons currently in the game and coming with Legion, there aren't many that fit the bill perfectly. Only a few have many limbs, spikes jutting out of their bodies, and tails. On top of that, the perpetrator would need to be smart enough to communicate with other species. This really only leaves one idea for me as to what it might be, though it's not a definite answer. The Annihilan, or Pit Lords as most players know them by, appear to be eerily close to the description of the Guardians. They have 6 limbs in total, which would certainly appear weird to anyone accustomed to the standard 4. Pit Lords are also known to be very tall, have long tails, claws, and spikes jutting out of various places on their bodies. There are a few things that don't exactly line up with the Guardian description, however. The first one that comes to mind is the fire that makes up the most prominent feature of the Annihilan's facial features. If you rewatched the Warlords of Draenor cinematic or have read the War of the Ancients trilogy, then you've probably seen or heard what I'm talking about. Without going too much off track, they're often described as having a maw encased in hellfire. Another big thing that is omitted from the Guardian description that Pit Lords do have is their large pair of wings. Though I'm pretty sure that they can't fly with them, which is an observation made by many characters in the lore as well, they are kind of hard to miss. You'd think they'd be listed somewhere in the detailed description of the beast, and yet there's no mention of wings. This may be a bit of a stretch, but I have a theory to explain how the Tomb's Guardians are actually Pit Lords. As many of you probably know, Annihilan are one of the strongest races to be a part of the Burning Legion, and often hold officer positions among its ranks. They're very intelligent, though they have been known to have a feral streak hit them in the midst of battle. What's more is that they've shown many times in the past to have a proficiency in the magical arts. Warlocks, who initially gained their powers from the Burning Legion, utilize 2 distinct kinds of magic, Fel and Void. This fact is exemplified in the Zul'Harrak fight in the Hellfire Citadel raid from patch 6.2. Here you get to see a monstrous combination of the 2 forms of shadow magic as you desperately try to stay out of the fire. Pit Lords aren't any different from their peers in the Legion's ranks, as they are masters of Fel energy. You can tell this from the distinct green glow that their fire attacks give off. Though we haven't seen much in terms of Pit Lords using void magics, this is a subset of shadow magic that can be characterized by the purple hue it gives off, which is commonly seen from classes like Shadow Priests. The Tomb's Guardians are said to have materialized from the shadows, and that their bodies appeared to be fluid-like. Controlling the darkness is something that's all too common for void magic users, and the way the Guardians manifest sounds too close to this to be a coincidence. The one logical stretch I'm taking here is saying that the Pit Lords have the capacity to use void magics, even though they've never been seen using them before. For a race that's so powerful that some of its members, such as Manaroth and Magtheridon, rank directly underneath Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, it shouldn't be too much of a leap to say that they can learn new types of magic. Just because we haven't ever heard of Annihilan using void magics before, doesn't mean that they can't use it at all. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think it was someone as powerful as Manaroth who was set to guard the Tomb of Sargeras from would-be intruders. That would be wasting far too much potential in a remote spot where far too visitors ever appear. Though that's not to say that some weaker or perhaps younger Annihilan couldn't be given guard duty at a place of significance in order to prove their worth. This, to me, seems to be the best possible explanation as to what was guarding the Tomb of Sargeras for so long. Even the lesser Annihilan have proven to be formidable in combat, and could easily kill someone like Gul'dan when he's caught off guard. And I could definitely see a pack of seasoned orc warriors managing to take down one such guardian after a vicious fight for their lives. Everything seems to fit in place, but it just doesn't feel perfect. Not yet anyways. I had to take a few too many logical leaps as a result of not being given enough information to fill in the gaps. I get the feeling that whatever actually killed Gul'dan is unique to the Tomb of Sargeras, and maybe we'll even get a glimpse of it in the newest expansion. But who's to say? Well, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Links to my social media and whatnot are in the description below, and as for the comment question, do you agree with my theory of a lesser Annihilan killing Gul'dan, or do you think something else did the old Warlock in? I'd love to hear any theories you might have, since this doesn't have a set in stone answer. Anyways, that's all the time I've got for today, so until next time, don't die.